Europe isn't poor, but it's stuck. For decades now, the continent has barely grown. Productivity is stagnant. Entrepreneurship is sluggish. Investment is cautious. Politicians talk about strategic autonomy and innovation sovereignty. But the reality is simple. Europe has made it incredibly hard to create wealth. This isn't a story of natural decline or global headwinds. It's a story of self-inflicted damage. Europe has built a system that smothers ambition with red tape, blocks dynamism with bureaucracy, and actively punishes success with taxes and suspicion. Start a business in Europe, and you'll immediately hit a wall of paperwork. In some countries, it takes weeks just to legally register your company. You need permits, certificates, notaries, sectoral approvals, sometimes just to open a bakery. And this isn't just about the Mediterranean South. Even in places like Germany or Austria, the process is slow, manual, and often offline. And here's the real kicker. Europe isn't a single market in the way people think. Yes, there's free movement of goods and people, in theory. But in practice, Europe is a patchwork of incompatible regulations. If you build a service business in Germany, that doesn't mean you can roll it out in Spain or France without jumping through new hoops. Each country has its own standards, its own taxes, its own licensing regimes. You can't bank freely across borders. Tax filings aren't harmonized. Consumer rules vary. Even employment contracts might need to be rewritten country by country. Imagine trying to scale a tech startup in that environment. You don't just have to win customers, you have to win a bureaucratic war in every single market. And for all the talk about competition and fair markets, the truth is, governments often protect the incumbents. Big firms get tax breaks, subsidies, lobbying access, and regulatory certainty. They can afford legal teams to navigate the complexity. They get consulted when the rules are written. Startups don't. Small and medium enterprises, which should be the engine of European growth, are left to fend for themselves in a system that seems designed to exhaust them. Labour laws make it even harder. In many countries, hiring someone is easy, but firing them is almost impossible. Which means businesses are cautious. They stay small. They automate slowly. They avoid taking on full-time staff unless absolutely necessary. It's not just a question of flexibility. It's a matter of survival. Then there's taxation. European states rely heavily on taxes to fund expansive welfare systems. That's not inherently bad, but the burden often falls hardest on productive activity, especially small firms and high earners. Between income tax, corporate tax, payroll taxes, and VAT, a growing business can see half or more of its profits siphoned away. And unlike in the US, there's rarely a payoff in terms of venture support, infrastructure, or world-class digital services. You pay more and get less. Even access to capital is constrained. European venture capital is growing, but it still lags far behind the US, and many pension funds and institutional investors are legally or culturally risk-averse. That leaves entrepreneurs with limited options: grind slowly through bank loans or leave. And many do. The brightest founders, the most ambitious engineers, the risk-takers, they go to America, or Singapore, or Dubai. Not because they don't love Europe, but because they want to build, and Europe doesn't make that easy. Culturally, Europe still treats profit with suspicion. It's not just a matter of left-wing politics. It runs deeper, into the collective psyche. Success is seen as something that must be justified, sometimes even apologized for. Entrepreneurs who make it big are rarely celebrated. They're interrogated. Where did the money come from? Who did they exploit? What loophole did they use? Instead of being treated as engines of innovation, they're cast as potential threats to social harmony. Growth itself is politically uncomfortable. It's seen as destabilizing, messy, potentially unjust. The moment something begins to scale, a company, a platform, an idea, it draws immediate scrutiny from regulators and public discourse alike. Not because it's doing something wrong, but because in Europe, power outside the state or old institutions is inherently suspect. There's a reason Brussels' first instinct with AI wasn't, how can this help us grow, but how do we control this before it causes harm? Before the first AI-driven productivity gains had even arrived, the regulatory machinery was already spinning. Rules were being drafted, restrictions proposed, new institutions discussed, and to some extent, that's understandable. Europe has been burned by big tech before, but the broader mindset is revealing. The question is not, what opportunities can we unlock, but how do we minimize risk? The market is something to be managed, not trusted. Entrepreneurs are treated as liabilities until proven otherwise. This attitude feeds into everything: how venture capital is taxed, how labour laws are written, how schools talk about business. It reinforces a vision of society where the private sector should exist, but only in a tightly fenced yard, productive enough to be taxed, but not free enough to change things too much. So what you end up with is a system that's world-class at preserving what already exists, but terrible at creating what doesn't. Europe excels at museums, not moonshots. It's great at curating the past, not inventing the future. And yet many Europeans don't see a problem. They're proud, and understandably so, of their beautiful cities, their universal healthcare, their free education, their trains that mostly run on time. The quality of life, on the surface, is high. But there's a dangerous complacency beneath it. Because if Europe keeps drifting like this, it risks becoming exactly what it already half is: a theme park for the world's rich. A continent that offers picturesque views, historical tours, and affordable university degrees, but produces little of consequence. The innovation happens elsewhere. The investment happens elsewhere. The ambition happens elsewhere. Europe becomes a service economy for tourists, a museum managed by curators who still believe they're leading the world. Of course, there are bright spots. Estonia's e-government, Denmark's startup scene, Dutch logistics. But they are the exception, not the rule. The overall picture is of a continent that has forgotten how to grow, or worse, has convinced itself that growth is dangerous. Until that changes, until Europe makes it genuinely easy to start, scale, and profit, it will keep falling behind. The US will keep pulling ahead. Asia will keep modernizing. And Europe will keep talking about strategic goals, while watching its economic relevance slowly slip away. It's not a mystery. It's a choice. And right now Europe is choosing decline dressed up as safety.